To quote the professor, archaeologist, and adventurer Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark, snakes. Why did it have to be snakes? Welcome to Keep It Fictional, a podcast for book lovers presented by some of your favorite book lovers at the Port Moody Public Library. And yes, dear listeners, today our reading recommendations will indeed involve those limbless reptiles known as snakes. I'm Liz, and joining me today are my book friends Virginia, Sadie, and Corinne. So, why snakes? Well, in January, we entered a new lunar year, the year of the snake. The snake is one of the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac, with those born in that year said to be wise, calm, and resourceful. However, snakes have been associated with or cast as the villain in countless stories across time. Just a few examples are Medusa and her serpentine hair, the snake who tempts Eve with the apple in the Garden of Eden, and those mother bleeping snakes on the mother bleeping plane in Snakes on a Plane, just to name a few. So we here at Keep It Fictional wanted to see how some recent reads approached this much maligned creature. So without further ado, let's get to the books. All right, Virginia, today I understand you have a book about talking in tongues, so to speak. We'll find out more from you.
Talking in Snakes, you mean Talking in Snakes. So the book that I read for today, I bought the ebook a few years ago and never read it. And Probably it was like on sale or something, and I did not like know about the book at all. So I was surprised that I didn't have to go searching for a book that fits this very, very specific and narrow topic of ours today, because snakes are no dragons. They are very, I know, hard to find in books. And I was also surprised to find that it is a book translated from Estonian. And I don't think I know that when I bought it. And it's a part of the world that I know very little about. And I have never read any book by an Estonian author. So I was really excited that this book also moves me like another step towards one of my reading goals this year. And good things, of course, comes in free. So I also wasn't expecting this and had no idea that it's in this book. And I was not specifically looking for it. But there's also some casual cannibalism in the later part of the book. So check all the boxes, you can say. Anyway, the book is called The Man Who Spoke Snakish, and it is by Andrus Kivirähk, and it is translated from Estonian into English by Christopher Moseley. It's got snake in the title, it's got snake on the cover, and it's also got snakes inside the book all over the place. So I would say this book is for readers who like folklore, who like stories that have got this kind of like allegorical kind of vibe to it. It feels like one of those stories that has been passed down from generation to generation. But that doesn't mean that the author only has nostalgia for the good old days. I feel like he's using the story to really explore the one constant in our life, in the history of humans, in the history of nature, the constant being change. Change is going to happen. And as one of the characters in the book said, some things rise to the surface, some things sink to the bottom. You know, what things those are change, but the cycle repeats itself. So our story is set in medieval Estonian around the 12th century. And it's a story about Limet, who lives with his mother, his sister, and his uncle in the forest. In the absence of his father, his uncle sort of takes on the role of the father figure, and Limet has a lot of respect for him because his uncle taught him everything that he knows. Limet's family is one of the very few remaining families that still live in the forest. The number has been dwindling year after year, and many folks have moved to live in the village, which is right outside the forest. And this village was first established by the men in iron and the monks that they brought along with them. Now, the men in iron came from afar, they landed one day, and they brought along this new way of living that are very, very different from what the Estonians are used to. In fact, when these Manninarian first arrived, the Estonians weren't even sure if they are humans or not, because from head to toe, they have this silver skin thing. And it's only later that they discovered that it's actually a helmet, it's an armor that they have on and that can be taken off, and inside is a human being. So somehow they were told that these clothes are supposed to protect the person inside. And it's very, very strange because the forest folks don't really wear clothes. They just wear like human animal skins. Alongside the suit of armors, there are all kinds of contraptions that these Man has brought along with them that they use at home, the ones that used to make these clothes that they wear, but also a whole lot of tools that they use to grow food, which is very, very strange to the forest folks because unlike them, these villagers, they're not hunters and gatherers. They work to get food, to grow them, which is the most bizarre thing because food is everywhere. Why do you have to labor to get food? That just doesn't make sense. And not only that, after all the work that they put in, they produce this bland, disgusting thing called bread that has absolutely no taste at all. Why would anyone want to eat that? The monks also bring along their religion. They talk about this god, this somebody, of course, unfamiliar and very different from what the Estonians believe. They teach a lot of things that they need to know, a lot of things that they're not allowed to do. There's just so many rules. And the strangest and the most ridiculous thing, according to the forest folks, is that the men in iron and the monks in the villages, they believe that snakes are evil, just like Liz said in the introduction. They believe that snakes are tools and agents of this being called Satan, and that snakes should be despised and they should be hated and they should be feared. Which Limet knows that none of them can possibly be true because humans and snakes have been friends since the beginning of time. His best friend, in fact, is a viper named Inks. His family goes hibernate with the snake family in their den during winter. They're not evil. They cannot possibly be evil. And snakes are also the ones that taught them the language Snakish, a language that lets humans talk to snakes and other animals. Now, snakes can communicate. You can have a conversation with them using Snakish, but not all the animals can talk back. They understand Snakish words, so you can use them to command them. You can request things from them, and that's kind of how the forest folks keep the wolves at home. They calm them down so that they can get milk from the wolves and they can travel on wolves. And Snakish gives them a way to communicate with these animals, even if they cannot talk back. Unfortunately, give when everyone start moving to the village, very, very few people can speak Snakish anymore. Limat is one of the few, along with his uncle. And because the people that live in the village, they don't think they need to learn Snickish anymore. They don't need this language anymore. And they have forgotten all the words that they used to know. Their new way of life makes Snickish obsolete. So at least that's what they feel like. So they rather rely on these other modern things that the Manninine has brought along to protect them instead of using the language Snickish. And so, to the point where, because so few people can speak them, even some of the animals started to forget Snickish. Now, the villagers' view of the snakes is probably the most confusing to Limat. Like, he's very proud of being one of the few remaining fluent speakers of Snickish. He cares for his best friend, Ings, and his family. And all the things he hears about the village just sound so ridiculous. But still, every now and then, he's still a little curious. He wants to know what all those things in the house do. And maybe even he wants to know what bread tastes like. He only have heard about it. Now, he doesn't think he's like his father, though. Like, his father actually moved his family to the village before he was born. His father has chosen to abandon the forest life and live like a villager. And so Limet was actually born in the village, a fact that many forest folks don't let him forget. And they kind of look down on him because of that. But an unfortunate incident has killed his father. His father came home one day to find his wife leave Limet's mother with a bear. Yes, they're also talking bears who are very, very good at seducing humans. And humans also can resist these big brown cuddly creatures. So yeah. But it was probably an accident. The bear doesn't mean to kill his father, but that happened. And his mother right away moved everybody back to the village because village life really wasn't for her, and she doesn't want to raise her kids there. So Limet, like, it's not like his father. He doesn't think, but he kind of is interested in what the village is like. So one day he and his friend decides they're gonna do it. They've always walked kind of all the way to the edge of the forest. They've never entered the village, but today they're gonna go. They're gonna go find out what all that is about. So is he going to be enticed like everyone else by all the novel things that he will find in the village? Is he gonna be impressed by those men in their iron suits? And the monk's going to convince them that they should follow their god. So the man who spoke Snakish is essentially a coming of age story as Limet tries to figure out what is the right path for himself. And what I like about the book is that it's not really a straight line. Sometimes in coming of age stories, they're often like a defining like moments or some incident that has happened that sort of sets everything in motion. But I find that in this book, there's lots of back and forth as Limet try to figure out, and experiences all the different things that happen to him, and as he meet different people that sort of influence his thinking. And I think it reflects sort of that nuance kind of point of view that the author has perhaps of kind of like change and the old ways versus the new ways, so to speak. There's quite a lot of tragedies that happen in Limet's life, and many of them are the result of these other people's religious convictions or their spiritual beliefs, both in the village and also in the forest. Lots of people are hurt, lots of people are sacrificed because of what they believe that God or the spirits are telling them to do and needing them to do, so that they have to like, hurt other people to appease them. So Limet went through a lot of those. And very often, he goes from like being really excited about discovering some new things to just like rage when things don't like work out and or just utter despair, and he get really disillusioned by a lot of things that happen in his life as he explores sort of a lot of ridiculousness, as he continue to feel like he's obligated and that he has like an obligation to carry out those traditions that especially since he's like one of the few people who has left in the forest. He feels like just a huge weight on him, and he often get really annoyed when people often call him like he's the last person to be this, he's the last person to be that, and he doesn't want to be that last anymore. It's exhausting for him. And I think part of it, the story is kind of saying it's okay to let go. It's okay to let go. It's okay because change will happen. And so I think to me it feels like a more realistic story, that is not very straightforward, and that it gives people the chance to change their minds. They don't have to kind of pick one thing and stick with it forever and ever. So as I mentioned earlier, a story that really reads like folklore, talking animals, other kind of fantastical elements in it. It does have some mentions of violence. I don't think they were vividly depicted, and they don't have long descriptions of it, but it is in there. But if you're interested in a science fiction award winner in Estonia, and you want to explore literature from different parts of the world, then check out The Man Who Spoke Snakish, and it is by Andrus Kivirähk, and it is translated by Christopher Moseley.
Thank you, Virginia. That sounds like a really interesting book. Leave it up to you to find these gems from parts of the world that we don't necessarily normally read about. And you also had me at casual cannibalism. Um, just grabbed me right there. Um, let's see if we change gears here with Corinne. I honestly don't know. She said that her book is a surprise. So I'm just dying to know, Corinne, what did you choose for today's episode?
Well, I'm going to start a little bit with my journey in that, of course, last night I went into Libby and I searched keyword snake. And so I obviously got a lot of, fact books about snakes. But what really surprised me when I was looking through was that Stanley Tucci's cookbook showed up with keyword snake. And I am dying to know why. Yeah. Tucci snake. Yeah, other than if someone doing the cataloging had real thoughts about him and his ex-wife, like I don't know, but I'm really curious to know. But as I was flipping through all of my choices, I had a very specific goal in mind, and that is snake romance. I was specifically looking for some snake romance, some kissing with snakes. Um, and thankfully, I was very successful in my quest. To be fair, I was looking for a human who could turn into a snake, so maybe like a shiftery romance, because I feel like that has possibilities. What I ended up with is that a snake turned into a person, which in like the harsh light of day, I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I don't know if I really care for that as a concept. But whatever, we're gonna go for it. So my mystery book that I ended up with is The Legend of the White Snake by Sher Lee. Ooh, by Sher Lee. Yes, this is a YA LGBTQ plus romance book about person and a snake, which was very exciting for me to read, and I was so excited. It is based on the Chinese legend of the White Snake, which, when I was Googling things, is apparently a Netflix show that I could watch. And it is centering around our prince, Prince Xian. And by God, when he was young, he got kidnapped, which they don't really get into, but I genuinely feel like it's his fault. And as they are about to like exchange this like white spirit pearl in order for his safe return, he boneheadedly like falls off a bridge into a lake. And this pearl is important because they have gone out of their way to find it, because the spirit pearl is the only thing that can save his mother. Now, his mother was bitten by a white snake. And has been slowly suffering and wasting away for a long time. But they have scoured the world to find one of these rare spirit pearls so that they can finally cure her. Unfortunately, our main character, as I said, not the swiftest boat in the sea, falls into the lake with holding the pearl like you do, and it falls out of his hands only to be eaten by a snake. I'm really fulfilling the brief today, and I'm quite proud of myself. All right, our prince grows up. He's strong, he's buff, he's hot, he's, honorable and stuff, and he loves his mom. His mom is still sick. And so they go to the oracle to see if they can find some other way to cure her. Now, short of the spirit pearl, the only other way that they can help heal her sickness is to get another white snake. And they're not quite sure what bits they need. It could be the gallbladder, it could be the teeth, it could be the venom, but something in that snake they could kind of like make into a smoothie to cure her, and it would be fine. Unfortunately, he has never been able to find the same rare snake that bit his mom. But the oracle says that if they travel to the town of Changla, they will be able to find what they need to cure his mother. And so he wrestles up his horse and his best friends, and they all go to this village. Now, flashback to 7 years ago when that boy fell off the bridge and that little snake ate that little pearl. Meet our next character, Jen, who really was hungry that day. He was hungry and he wanted a spirit pearl. So he noshed down upon it because it would fulfill his dream to be able to change into a human form. Now, human forms have a lot of advantages. You can run, you can jump, you can eat a lot of different foods, but they also have a lot of problems. Because of the spirit pearl and the fact that he used it to save another young snake, he too is suffering from a malady that can only be cured by Actually, I don't remember why he's going there. I think he's going to go and eat a flower. Anyways, it's not important. Destiny's at work, people. Destiny is at work. He's also going to this strange little village in the middle of nowhere in order to find something to kind of help cure himself and to help cure his sister figure. He's hired on as a stable boy at the palaces. And whose horse should he happen to be looking at when the prince strolls in but the prince's horse itself? They fall into some witty banter and both think that each other are hot. Yep. That's that's it. And so even though poor Jun does not realize that the prince is here on a quest to hunt down him, making it a very awkward first couple of dates when they're going out hunting in the forest for him. And of course, when the prince realizes this, it's going to be a horrible betrayal because he thinks it's the snake that bit his mom, but then he also ate the spirit pearl that was due to his mom. And so it's a little bit like awkward and they have a falling out. And then there's like an evil monk in there somewhere. This is not really important. And then, yeah, there's a lot of like political intrigue with him because he's like the second son and the first son is all grumpy that he's so majestic and honorable and good looking and so much better than him, and his dad likes him better than the firstborn son, and that's all awkward. Anyways, this is all wrapped up in a beautiful little love story where like you fall in love with the wrong person at the wrong time, but maybe you might actually be soulmates. And do you tell the truth to the one that you love, or do you keep it a secret that you're actually a snake? That you're actually a snake, not a metaphorical snake, a literal snake. You're an actual snake. You are a little like snake, and then you have human form. Anyways, this is the second novel by Singaporean author Sher Lee. And if you are kind of like a big fan of Danmei, Wuxia, Xiansha's, like the kind of like stories that they're telling, this really is that. Like it has all the tropes. It has every single trope that you could ever dream of, down to like the evil monk. Like it's got it all. I don't think it's really there to reinvent the genre at all. I think what I, and kind of looking through some of the other reviewers, had the same problem, is that they are instantly deeply in love with each other. And I know Sadie will back me up on this one, but like instant love or instant like attraction where you're willing to like throw over all other things does not make sense. Within 3 days, it's like, you are my soulmate. And I'm like, no, you don't even know what their favorite color is. You don't even know that he's a snake. Like, maybe have a conversation or two before you start doing that. Just like calm it down a little. It's a lot. It's a lot. And because so much of the story and your like enjoyment of it hinges on believing in that relationship and being on board for it, because they have nothing in common and they don't really talk that much. And it's just like, well, he plays a really good game and he's good on a horse. Like, that's not enough. That does not a lifelong relationship make. Um, the other thing is, and this is really hard, the main character, Xian, is kind of horrible. You first meet him, other than getting kidnapped, which I don't want to victim blame here. That's probably not his fault. But the next time that we meet him as kind of like a young man on the precipice is he is coming back from like a conquest where he lied to this commoner to have sex with him and then comes back like strutting against, oh, and he never realized I was the prince. And I could not get over that. I understand his reasoning and I understand why he may not want to share that he is like the prince of the realm, but it really did leave a bad taste in my mouth. So that like when I'm looking through all of his actions going on under kind of that lens of he's like a liar and he's a playboy and he doesn't really care that much about people, it's really hard when you don't see like a huge character shift or a huge change. Like ideally in your romance, you know, each of your characters have flaws, and then when they come together, they kind of compensate or kind of support each other or kind of even out those flaws in those characters. But because neither of them really change at the end, it does unfortunately come off feeling a little bit flat as a romance. Um, Jen is just too good. He's a good little snake. And sure, he ate that pearl, but like, quite frankly, so would I. If someone's going to dangle like a magical potato chip in front of me, I'm going to eat it. Um, yeah. So his guilt doesn't particularly make sense, and he's too good and he's too sweet, up and until the fact that one of the concubines that like beats him up so badly that he falls unconscious, he like generously forgives out of the goodness of his heart. I'm like, why? 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 So yeah, not everyone's actions make sense. And because he stays really good and the prince just kind of accepts that I guess I'm in love with a snake, like there's not a lot of shift in it, so that the resolution doesn't feel very satisfying, which is too bad because I think I would have really enjoyed this story with maybe a slower burn. And maybe if the Prince character was a little bit more consistent, or because this is a snake episode, consistent. Don't look at me like that, Liz. I'm trying very hard. Yeah, I think I would have enjoyed this story a little bit more. I think if you're a fan of the genre, it is like a fun little romp with snakes. Um, a fun little romp with snakes. And there were much more snakes than I had originally intended because every snake, like in Virginia's book, can talk, which was interesting and fun. And yeah, I'm interested to see kind of what Sher Lee does in the future, whether she kind of her other book was a YA contemporary. This one is more like historical fantasy. I'm really interested to see kind of what she does in the future because, like, again, this was fun. Could I have detailed the entire plot from the first chapter and every like character beat that it would take? Yeah. But that's really not the point. Like sometimes when you're reading something that's so genre, that's the reason why you're reading it. That's the reason why you're reading it. Yeah. So in conclusion, snake romance.
Thank you, Corrine. Can always count on you to bring the spice, and the puns. Okay, so this week's existential question, not a big one, just a small one. Uh, because we're talking about snakes today, I thought we'd open it up to maybe animals in general in literature. So, are there any deal breakers for you when you're approaching a book and you find out it features a blank animal? Any deal breakers for you where you're like, yeah, no, hard pass?
Not a big, as we discovered, I'm not a big fan of the word beast, period. I really truly hate that word. And I don't really like to read a lot of books with animals, if I'm being super honest. Usually, honestly, if it's a book with dogs, I usually stay far away from it because you can bet that the dog's not going to like be alive by the end of the book, especially if it's like literary fiction. So honestly, usually if there's a dog, I avoid it. And usually, except this poor snake romance, I didn't quite realize it. I don't love the trope of like any animal turning into a human and then it being a romance because at the core, it's still a snake with snake experience, like not human experience. There's a Tamora Pierce series, Trickster's Choice, which is like a YA series as well. And one of the love interest is like a crow who turns into a human or has a human form. And even like as a young teen, I was like, hold up a minute. That's still a bird. Like you're still like it's different skin on, but like still a bird.
Bugs. Can't do well. I mean, I can, but I prefer not to read about bugs of any kind, really. Yeah, that's and honestly, before this one, snakes were not my favorite either. So I'm gonna stick with snakes and bugs.
I second the bugs, particularly spiders, anything with spiders. Visually thinking about them, I can't. I just, when you get that kind of itch on your head and it feels like they're crawling on you, I can't do it. So, total deal breaker. Other animals, that's cool. That's fine. Let me hear their thoughts. Virginia?
I don't think like I don't know if I like have anything that I would like not read, including like, as you all know, spiders, cockroaches. Like I seek them out, in fact, even though I am deadly terrified of them in real life. But in books, they're fine. I don't really mind them. I just like to torture myself. I feel like that's probably it. I'm waiting for an interlibrary loan. Speaking of that, it's supposed to be narrated by sentient cockroaches, and I hate cockroaches, but I cannot wait for that to come. But it's not coming because I don't know. There's only one library in the world that has it. So I might have to buy it because I really do want to hear from these sentient cockroaches. But yeah, like I don't think I particularly get drawn into like books with animals. I don't think. I don't mind them. But yeah, I like to torture myself with books, I think. So
I almost feel like we have to have a bug episode in future. Sorry, Sadie, just so we can hear about these sentient cockroaches.
I can bring sentient cockroaches to any episode. Does not have
Weave
to
it in
be a bug
there.
episode.
But is there cannibalism? I guess we'll find out on a future episode of Keep It Fictional. Um, anyways, moving along. In light of Corinne's surprise book, I thought I'd talk about my book next because it also happens to be a reimagining of the legend of the white snake. However, as you will find out, it is quite a different take. So the book I read was Sister Snake by Amanda Lee Koe, who is also a Singaporean author. So in this reimagining of the legend of the white snake, which, as you have heard, is a Chinese romantic folk tale that traditionally centers around a male human and a female snake spirit. So Corinne had her take with, a male-male love story. This one is a bit different. So go back to the Tang Dynasty in China, and for those of us not familiar with all of our dynasties and when they happened, this was about 1,000 years ago. So around the year 800, we're like in the thick of the Tang Dynasty. And during this time, by a river in Hangzhou, China, lived two female snakes. Now, one was a white crate, and that particular type of snake is known for being very calm and yet very deadly and poisonous if they feel they must protect themselves or strike. And the other snake was a green viper who, in contrast to the white snake, was very quick to be provoked, very hot-tempered, but not nearly as poisonous or deadly. And now, the white snake would see people walking by the river every single day, and for whatever reason, took a great interest in humans. They loved seeing how they moved, they loved seeing how they interacted with each other, and would listen in on their conversations and try and imagine this world that these people were talking about. They loved humans so much that they desired to become a human themselves, which impossible, one would think. However, even though the green snake didn't share her friend's enthusiasm, she loved her so dearly and supported her so much that she decided to try and make this happen. She risked her life to obtain magic lotus seeds that would grant them immortality, as well as the ability to shift into human form. So it wasn't a matter of just swallowing the seeds and then poof, you are a human being. It took them 800 years of meditation and resolve in order to spiritually, as well as physically, transform themselves into humans. Now, fast forward to present day, 21st century, or 21st century world, and there's a woman named Su Bai, and she is living in Singapore. She's a picture-perfect wife of a very conservative and up-and-coming government official. Now, over the years, she has built up a considerable fortune, so she is very well-to-do, doesn't want for anything. Her days are spent shopping, making philanthropic donations, and ironically getting beauty treatments to add some wrinkles to her perpetually youthful face. Her last name, Bai, means white in Chinese. Now, another woman on the other side of the world, her name is Emerald, and she is a sugar baby in New York. She dates rich men that she meets on apps as a way to fund her existence. She lives day by day, week by week, and is the complete opposite of Ms. Bai in Singapore. Now, of course, you could see this coming a mile away. Sue is the white crate, and Emerald is the green viper. And despite their closeness and everything they went through in their early years as snakes, the two wildly different women decided to part ways, and they became both geographically and emotionally distant. One day, Sue gets a Google alert about a snake that was shot after it nearly killed a naked man in Central Park. Even though the video footage that she's been able to find online is very grainy, she knows that it cannot be anyone other than Emerald. So she immediately boards a plane for New York. She tells her husband that there's been an emergency and she needs to visit her sister right away. Now, Sue tracks down Emerald, and she doesn't tell her that she's been monitoring her whereabouts, what she's been up to for the many years that they've been apart. And they have a tenuous reconciliation. She just happens to be in New York. Hey, how's it going? And somehow Sue is able to convince Emerald, who is flat broke at this point and has almost killed her sugar baby daddy, to come back to Singapore with her. Now, as you can imagine, this is where the story starts to go off the rails. You've got two snakes going on a plane back to a very conservative country where one of the snakes is married to a very conservative, high-ranking, up-and-coming politician. Emerald sticks out like a sore thumb. She's got a punk style. She's not the refined, classically dressing and classically acting person. She doesn't try and go under the radar. She has no filter. She is undeniably just absolutely owning who she is. There's also the matter of the urge of the women to feed on the energy of living beings. So as a result of being snakes, they need chi to survive. So whether that living being is a human or it's an animal, that is what is truly what nourishes them. And of course, the whole thing about nobody's supposed to know that they're actually snakes. So that's a huge, huge taboo for them. Of course, from there, chaos ensues. I don't want to tell you too much, but I will say that the writing, I was very impressed at how the writing was fast-paced, the dialogue was witty. The story doesn't take itself too seriously. However, there wasn't really any point where I kind of thought, okay, you've gone too far. I can't really see where you're going with this. I was really impressed by how succinctly the author was able to tie together so many things and be so many things. It shows Singapore as it is presented to the world, but it also manages to show the ungentrified and unhomogenized parts that are gritty and full of character and life under the surface. This is a book about found family and love. It's about queerness and belonging, gender politics, societal expectations, and it gives such an astute look at modern society and how we perceive people and how we try and pigeonhole people into the things that society wants. And I thought that the author was so good at doing this in a way that was not preachy or pedantic. The story felt modern and fresh, and yet it also didn't seem too trendy and like something where, I'm not going to understand your dialogue or your lingo in a couple years because the world's going to have moved on from that. So I thought Amanda Lee Koe did a really skillful job of balancing sort of that magically realistic story, all the craziness that happens, as you can imagine, when you've got two snakes loose on planes in Singapore, in New York. And one thing I thought that was really quite clever was that each chapter has a title that was that's a phrase taken from within that chapter. So as an example, 100% prepared to go full death metal, apex predator femme queen, a pretty girl like you shouldn't be batting for the other team, and time heals all wounds is fridge magnet BS. So that kind of gives you a taste of Amanda Lee Koe's style. So if you're into retellings, if you're into something with a modern, fresh take, leaving that original like male-female love story and then finding something that's maybe a little bit deeper about found family that maybe is something more, then you may want to check out Sister Snake by Amanda Lee Koe. All right, and to wrap things up today, we have Sadie with a book that sounds so interesting. It's a book that weaves together different mythologies. Sadie, what do you have for us today?
All right. I would actually like to start by giving a bit of a content warning. My overview, as well as the stories and the book that I'm going to be talking about, deal very strongly with sexual harassment and abuse, physical and sexual violence, and misogyny. So please tread carefully if these themes and topics are difficult for you, as the author does not shy away from them in any way. Now, as Liz mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the myth of Medusa is well known. The snake-haired monster woman who could turn a person to stone with just one look. Unbeatable by many, until the hero Perseus was able to decapitate her and would go on to use her head as a weapon and an amulet. She's looked at as the enemy, a monster that needed to be slain, the evil to Perseus's good. However, Medusa's backstory is not as often talked about. How at one time she was a beautiful young woman who made a vow of celibacy to the goddess Athena. How she caught the eye of the god Poseidon, and how he forced himself upon her, raped her, and left her in Athena's temple. How in retribution for breaking her vow, even though she was raped, Athena punished Medusa, cursing her to become the monster. It is this part of the myth which author Sajni Patel focuses on in her young adult novel, A Drop of Venom. Patel's story follows a young girl named Manisha, and we start with the Fire Wars. Manisha's people, the Naga, are being forced to defend their very lives against the king. His armies have driven them from their homes and scattered them across the land. But the Naga aren't giving up their home without a fight. Manisha is only 11 and is being kept out of most of the fighting, unlike her older sisters Ashani and Sithara. When it looks like their family may not survive the fighting, Ashani and their mother make the decision to send Manisha to the floating temple. They tell her to hide her true nature, to hide the fact that she is a Naga, and to survive. So Manisha leaves the only home and family she has ever known, not knowing if she will ever see her mother, her father, her sisters, her aunts, her uncles ever again. And she ascends to the floating temple to become a priestess, to be safe. Pratyush and his family have always lived apart from the rest of the kingdom. His father is a mythical monster hunter, one of very few who hold the abilities to slay and absorb the lives of monsters. To save himself and his family from being forced into the king's service, Pratyush's father made the decision to run, to hide away in the middle of nowhere, but to have a life. However, the king's most recent monster slayer has died, and the monsters that were being killed are now running rampant. And to make matters worse, Pratyush has started showing the same signs of being a monster slayer, something the king must never find out. But then the monsters attack, killing Pratyush's parents. In a last effort to save himself and his sister, Pratyush takes up his father's sword, killing the monsters and forever dooming himself to a life of servitude to the king as his new monster slayer. 9 years later, Pratyush and Manisha will meet at the floating temples and are instantly drawn to each other, Manisha has spent years as a priestess in training, narrowly avoiding being sold to a noble when she first arrived. And she has carved out a life for herself, if not a happy one, at least a safe one. But she has never forgotten her life before, her family, and has been trying to find a way off the floating temple to reunite with them. When Pratyush offers her a way out, it sounds too good to be true. Too good for her to believe and to agree to. But Pratyush is happy to wait, see what Manisha decides. He's planning on petitioning the king to release him from service, to allow him to buy a small piece of land so he can marry Manisha and the two of them can live happily and peacefully. So Pratyush tells Manisha that he will be back. He will go talk to the king, and when he comes back, she can tell him her decision. When Pratyush makes his way back to the kingdom, the king eventually agrees to discuss his request, but only after he kills one final monster. A horrible creature who may be able to transform into a giant snake and who is going through the kingdom, turning men into stone. Without many options, Pratyush agrees and gathers a group of soldiers together, including one horrible man who is known as the General and who reports directly to the king. And they set out to find the snake monster. The night that Pratyush leaves the temple, Manisha is making her way back to her rooms and mulling over his offer when she is approached by a soldier, a large man who she has seen accompany Pratyush to the temple now and then. Now, as a priestess, Manisha is not allowed to approach a man on her own. However, the man seems lost, and Manisha fears that if he trips and falls from the floating temple, the new head priestess will blame her, as she had a chance to lead him back to the buildings and back to safety. However, when Manisha agrees to help the man, he does not follow her back to the temple. Instead, he grabs her and forces himself upon her, raping her and throwing her from the floating temple down to the ground, hundreds of feet below. Shocked and in extreme amounts of pain, Manisha falls into a pit of vipers. As the snakes cover her body and continue to bite her and fill her with their venom, Manisha knows that she will never see her family again. However, when she wakes, covered in bites but somehow alive, Manisha realized that the snake's venom has changed her. She has abilities that she didn't have before. She can communicate with snakes, including the small but growing bigger by the day golden snake who follows her everywhere and that she names Noni. Her skin is now like armor, and her blood can turn a person to stone. In alternating perspectives and ever so slightly different timelines, we see the story unfold from both Manisha's and Pratyush's eyes, as Pratyush searches for the monster and the woman who he has both vowed to kill and vowed to marry. As I mentioned at the beginning, this story centers a lot around sexual abuse and the trauma that comes with it. And Sajni Patel, as I said, does not shy away from these topics. Manisha is both trying to understand her new powers and abilities while also dealing with the physical and emotional trauma of her abuse, and is desperately trying to find her family again. On her journey, she meets a variety of people, including young women who have been through similar traumas and abuses as her, mysterious elders who foresee her powers and predict her rise, and horrible men who continue to abuse the women around them, and whom Manisha vows to punish with her newfound power. Patel weaves together the classic Greek story with Indian mythology to give us a feminist take on the Medusa myth, a revenge story, and a battle cry from a woman who turned her trauma into her own power. After all of that, I will say that the book was all right. I really liked the idea of the story, and I think that Patel's take on the story was really interesting, and kind of the message that she wanted to send and what she wanted to say with the story definitely came through really strongly and was very, very powerful. I liked that both Pratyush and Manisha are very sympathetic protagonists. Patel has balanced the inclusion of some pretty terrible men in this story with Pratyush and his best friend Dev, and a couple of others who do everything that they can to stop these men and to speak up and act up in defense for the women that they're harassing. The connection between Manisha and Pratyush is really well written, and I think that it was really strong. However, I don't know if everything was executed perfectly. The writing at times seemed a little bit stilted. The dialogue didn't necessarily flow very smoothly. And I think the biggest problem I had with it was there were certain things that felt very unfinished and not entirely thought out. Maybe this will be addressed in a sequel, but it just felt like there were parts of the story that kind of worked just for one purpose and then were just sort of dropped and forgotten about and not completed. For example, there's one village that Manisha finds, and there's these two young women who take her in and kind of help her. And through this experience, she learns that this village is being terrorized by this other village, who is mainly men who are coming in and kidnapping the women and keeping them as slaves and abusing them. And so at one point, one of the young girls who helped Manisha gets kidnapped. And so Manisha and her sister go to help her. And this is how she finds that she has these powers to turn people to stone. And then she defeats some of them, but then leaves. And then the rest of the village basically goes, attacks this other village, kills all the men, kidnaps all the women. And we learn this, and then nothing else happens. They don't go back. They don't kind of wrap up the story. At one point, Pratyush finds the village as well. And we learned that it was one of the women who helped Manisha, who is now being held captive and a slave. And then there's nothing done with it. And it just felt a disservice to the characters and a disservice to kind of the story in a little bit, just to sort of abandon these people to serve as this placeholder almost and then not go back to it. But maybe it will be addressed in a sequel. Maybe they will come back and kind of we will see those characters again. I think that if you are looking for a new take on the Medusa myth, one that places some very strong gray areas into the usual black and white good versus evil story that's originally presented by the Greeks, then you may want to check out A Drop of Venom by Sajni Patel.
Thank you, Sadie, for your honest take on what otherwise sounds like a very interesting story. Okay, well, that's all we got for you today. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us on our episode all about books about snakes. We hope you, even if snakes aren't your animal of choice, we hope you found some picks that may compel you to pick them up at some point. So thanks, and we'll see you on another episode. Bye for now.